Welcome to the MuseCast, where we squeeze every last drop of inspiration out of Sunday's sermon.
Well, hello. Welcome to the MuseCast, where we get to continue the conversation from our Sunday sermons. I am Shawna Boren. That gentleman is Dan Kent. Dan, it is rainy here in Minnesota today. It's been a rainy Tuesday. What do you like to do when it's so rainy and just outside?
Yeah. First of all, when it's like cloudy and rainy, those are the best days to sleep in. I mean, the air is crisp and you lose the humidity and you can just sleep for hours in those conditions. So that's probably my favorite thing to do about the rain, especially because it's been really humid the last couple of weeks. So
it has.
It's been nice. So how about you? What do you like to do?
You know, we're on the same page there. I love a good nap in the
both lazy, basically.
In fact, we're really asleep right now. No, just kidding. Yeah, I love a good nap. Just like hearing the rain fall. I mean, they have sound machines with the sound of rain for a reason, right? To help you go to sleep.
Yeah.
So,
but I can tell the difference because it's not just the sound,
right?
It's the feeling of the air, the smell.
Yeah, it's so great. And when the air is just a little crisper.
That's right.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
You can't mimic that.
Can't mimic that. Well, on to why we're really here. This weekend, Greg wrapped up our race conciliation series, and he gave a really lovely, just a summary, a reflection, and then we had an extended panel discussion. And so, Dan, could you please, for us, give a summary of his summary?
Yeah, what Greg did this week is he looked at sort of the history of racism through the Bible and into modern America, and I mean, it wasn't like a history class, but it just looked at certain themes that have reappeared over the last couple thousand years. And what was most interesting to me was looking at the Jews and the Gentiles in Acts, and just looking how tough it was for God to break through to Jesus' disciples about their need to kind of be unified with the Gentiles, and just all of the resistance there about how the Gentiles, they just live such strange ways and they do such strange things, and there is great resistance to bringing the gospel to the Gentiles. And Greg argues, I think correctly, that that's kind of racism. That's what it is. It's preventing you from doing what God has called you to do with people who are different than you. And it's just so. This is what I love about having Peter in the New Testament, is it just
so great.
Look at how stubborn and how hard it is to get Peter to do what God wants him to do.
Makes you feel good about yourself a little bit.
It makes me feel better.
At least I'm not Peter.
Yeah. What were your thoughts on Greg's kind of historical look at that?
Yeah, I thought it was, I love the way, again, when you can zoom out and kind of look at, this is not just a new issue that we're wrestling with and trying to solve. And in fact, this isn't just a global issue, but specifically this has been a church issue, an issue amongst believers. I thought that was really powerful. And I think too, it's important, like, we love the church. We love being God's people. We believe that we are called to bring forth his kingdom here on earth, but our church has been sick. And I think it's important to call that out and deal with the sickness so that we can be the fully healthy, vibrant, and alive church that God has called us to be as his people. And so I appreciated very much Greg taking us through the series with the other speakers that were involved. And I also appreciate just his recap, his reflection of it all. I thought it was really powerful.
And hats off to Greg. I mean, what a warrior he has been for the last few months now on this. And I just think he's been such a great model of leadership in this situation. And not only Greg, but like the situation has really sort of brought to the surface in our church some wonderful leaders as well. And I'm thinking of just the panel that we had, including you.
Oh, thank you.
So I've just really enjoyed seeing all of these different kind of wise souls that we have in our church. And so,
yeah, this series felt a little different. It's not just, I mean, we are heavy on the theology and we love that around here, and I know that's your bread and butter, you love that, but it wasn't just heavy on that, it was emotional, and I think that takes a little more out of a person when they're speaking on that, something theologically heavy but also emotionally heavy and currently relevant. And so I think it was handled beautifully. I truly do.
Yep.
So in regards to the series as a whole, so this is kind of like a reflective MuseCast, right? We had a reflective sermon, and now we're going to have a reflective MuseCast. So Dan, as you think about the series as a whole, what would you say personally is the most significant thing that you learned?
That's a good question, because there's so many things.
I know.
There's so many things that I learned, and so many of the things that you learn, it's not very tangible. It's just it's more influential. It's more empathetic, where you hear people's testimonies and your heart softens. And so it's not like I learned lesson 4, 5, and 6. I mean, it's a lot more squishy than that, but just as important. But I guess if I had to have like one tangible thing that has really been driven home over the last couple months, it's this idea that racism is not necessarily a binary thing. It's not necessarily good apples and bad apples. It's a very quantitative sort of thing, where when you look at systemic racism, it's not that in systems you have racists and non-racists. It's rather distributed through everybody, no matter what race you are, because the racism and the presuppositions that fuel the racist system, we all kind of reinforce them and nurture them. And so the question isn't who are the racists, the question is what elements of these racist presuppositions am I still wrestling with, because I think that we all are still wrestling with it. And that reality that racism isn't a binary thing, it's more of a quantitative thing, has really been driven home over the last couple months. That's probably what I'd say. How about you?
So many significant things, many challenging things. I think the topic as a whole was challenging. I think the depth at which we got down to the nitty-gritty was significant and challenging, so I'm combining those two. I loved hearing, like you said earlier, from the various people that were involved in the panels, hearing stories, learning some of their background, the things that they have been through, the things that God has brought them through, the ways in which we were able to learn from them, I thought was really powerful. It was a little challenging because on a couple of different fronts. One, personally, because anytime, like, I was involved in small parts throughout the series, and anytime you put yourself out there in a vulnerable way, it's a little scary. It was challenging because we wrestled with people's real questions, and sometimes those questions I would have to really sit with them before the Lord, because they just kind of pricked something within me that I had to wrestle with. And there was also a challenge because I recognize that although I am of mixed race, I recognize that not everyone recognizes that right off the bat, and so I recognize that sometimes I have to hold up others who are more obviously oppressed or have been more obviously affected, and so that's been a challenge. It's been a little bit lonely, but I can say that Jesus has met me there. I have never experienced what George Floyd's mom or family or the people witnessing, I've never experienced that degree of violence personally. And so it was important to me to make sure that the right things were held up and said, look at this, ouch, let's deal with this. And not just make it personal, because I did feel it, of course I felt it, but recognizing that there are others who have felt it even more. And so it was just a whole mixed bag to get back to that, what Greg talked about a few weeks ago. It was so much good. There was a lot of heartache. There was a lot of tough stuff. You know, you hear comments that you go, oh my word, like, have we gotten far at all? And then you hear comments and you think, oh yes, there is hope. And so it has been a huge mixed bag. But ultimately, I really, truly did feel Jesus in the midst of it all, like right there in the boat, like while the seas were raging all around us.
You know, isn't it like comforting? It's very encouraging to be in a church where people of color can feel safe enough to share their testimonies and to engage in these very tough topics. Like you said, I mean, this isn't easy stuff for anybody to talk about, especially people who might be more severely affected by it than others. And so I'm just very grateful to be at a church where people have the support to feel like they can do that. And that comes from our leadership and all the way down. So I'm very grateful for that. I think a challenging thing for me has been sort of a persistent thing where, like for me, like I'm most useful in helping people adapt to the situation and to make the best of whatever situation we have. And I think what I'm learning is that, you know, we need people who are going to change the system and overthrow the system. And I want to be supportive of that, but I'm just not that guy. I'm the guy who says, okay, what do we have? How can we best thrive with what we have? And so that's been challenging for me to kind of figure out what role should I play in all of this, because I don't know if, maybe it's because I'm getting old, but I'm too old to I'm too old to be the revolutionary now, you know? I'm more about, let's just see what we could do with what we got, you know? So I think that's probably been the most challenging thing for me.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
This is kind of maybe a little bit of a curveball.
Okay.
But you have been very vulnerable. Ready?
Yes.
Who needs the twins? No, just kidding.
I need the twins.
I know you do. I know you do. You've been vulnerable in previous series and times that you've spoken about your history, and you certainly weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth. You certainly didn't have an easy go of it. Do you feel, Dan, like some of your own story, some of your own history has helped you with that compassion and empathy piece that we have said over and again needs to be there?
That's a good question. I think what I would say is there's a lot of people who hear about oppression, and they get frustrated. If they're white, they're frustrated because they've lived hard lives. And we all in this world live hard lives, and it's not easy for anybody. And so there's this feeling of the kind of spite, like kind of disregarding the suffering that a white person might experience, and I definitely early on kind of felt some of that more. But I'm also the type of guy who I just want to party, you know. I want let's all get along, and I don't like conflict. And so early on in my kind of academic career and in my Christian walk, I was kind of pulled with both of those forces. I want everybody to get along because I hate conflict, but at the same time, I honestly felt like, well, wait a minute, how come we're giving so much attention to their suffering when a lot of white people suffer too, and life's not easy for anybody? And I think what has really helped me are some of these ideas that, just this acknowledgement that when you are fighting against racism and racial oppression, you're not saying that white people don't have hard lives. You're just saying that the color of their skin isn't one of those problems. We all are going to experience suffering and struggle in this world, and a lot of that you can't do anything about. What I think racial reconciliation efforts are trying to do is they're trying to remove something that we do have say-so about, and I think that's been very helpful for me. But yeah, so.
I like the way you worded trying to remove something that we do have say-so about, because while it is true, like many have suffered, hardly anyone has had an easy road, because we are a part of this fallen world, and humans hurt humans, and humans abuse humans, and that's unfortunately a part of God's kingdom not being fully reconciled on this earth yet. But I think, so to say that we are going to focus on, like we keep saying, this collective ouch, this horrific history of centuries of neglect, outright abuse, treating people as non-humans, focusing on that in no way discounts the story of everyone else. And so I think it's really important. I feel like we've said that throughout the series, but in our little recap MuseCast, I think it's an important point
I
to
agree.
bring forth again.
I also want to say really quick.
Go ahead.
I had some really unique situations as a child growing up, but it wasn't like this Hallmark story or anything.
Yeah.
It wasn't that bad. It was, I just had a couple of unique challenges having a young mom, but my mom, she worked hard and she did an amazing job given the situation that she had, and so it's not like we were on the street all the time hand to mouth or anything. I just want to be clear on that. So a lot of kids had it. Many millions of kids had it far worse than me. So
absolutely,
be clear on that.
Yep, but it doesn't discount your story.
You're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
And so one of the things that we've tried to be out loud about, and again, since we're recapping everything, I think it's a good idea to do again, is to say that for those of you who are not people of color, for those of you who have not experienced the kind of direct racism and or oppression that we've been talking about, for those of you who are just like, hey, I maybe wasn't even fully aware of the history of all of this, or maybe they kind of knew the history but didn't realize how it plays into the present, we have said that there is grace and there is room right at the table. And not to feel guilty per se about not understanding, but now that you are awakening to some of this stuff, begin to see what God would call you to do. And so, do you have any words of Dan Kent wisdom for those folks?
Well, and I think everybody has to take a look at who they are and what their skills are, what their gifts are, and that's something that I'm learning. Like, how can I best help in this? And I think for me, like, helping people in the situation that we are in thrive, even if things aren't the way we want it to be, is something that I'm particularly feel competent at. But the other thing I would say is there's a lot of stuff that frustrates me. Like, I'm like the least political person I know. I don't read political news, and I get frustrated with politicians. Everybody does, but I get frustrated with just because there's no politician that I'm really interested in.
Sure.
But if a politician would take it as one of their primary issues to make the incarceration problem go away and to kind of get rid of the inequality in our prison systems, boy, that's something that I would really get excited about. And I've even found myself kind of engaging some local politicians about I don't care what your views are on the water levels or on the deer, how many deer we have in the fields. What are you doing about our incarceration situation? And because that's a very tangible thing that I can kind of press people on. And politicians want to know what people care about. And so for me, this feels so weird for me to kind of take a political issue. So that's something that I've been doing is I found this one issue that I care about because I care about families. And I think that historically the evangelical church has cared about families and have, I think, rightly prioritized the health of a family. But that's got to include black families as well. And if you're taking black fathers and black sons and putting them in prison for things that they shouldn't be in prison for, I think if you really care about families, you need to tackle this social problem. And so finding social problems that I have some passion for and trying to see what I can do to help with that. That's the best I could do.
So let me ask you this, because you just tapped into something that I think is huge, very important, but I think many people are still not fully informed about. And so there are many that would hear what you just said about the incarceration problem, about taking black fathers away from families, and they would say, well, then don't commit a crime. And then you wouldn't get incarcerated.
I wish it was that easy.
Can you just help? I mean, I know you can't give us a full-on lesson, but we do have an incarceration problem.
We do, and the problem is that you have, when you take a look at like addiction, for instance, we're all roughly the same biologically, and so the percentage of the population that should struggle with addiction is going to be the same, whether you're black or white, and yet you have 5 times as many black people who are in prison for drug-related offenses than white people, even though there are more white people in the country. And so that's there's something wrong with the system when you have that. If you commit a crime, yes, you should be held responsible for it, but what exactly does it mean to be held responsible for a crime? And is that definition fair? Why is it that your penalty for selling crack cocaine is 20 times worse than your penalty for selling just regular cocaine.
Yep.
Well, it's not a coincidence that
Nope.
black people tend to sell crack cocaine because they can make more money on it and because it's easier to do than regular cocaine, which tends to be a white person drug.
Yeah.
They're fundamentally the same drug. And so why should one drug have 20 times the penalty as the other? There's no explanation for it other than there hasn't been as much resistance to lowering the penalty on this drug because it's primarily a drug in the black community.
Yeah.
And so stuff like that is just like, yeah, you need to be held responsible, but why is it that we have this profound inequality in people who are incarcerated? And that's true for adolescents and adults. And that's just one example. There's a lot, there's many more examples where you see that inequality. And to me, it just seems like a no-brainer that a politician should take this as one of their primary issues because it's a very tangible thing that you can see results on and you can boast about what you do. So take this on, people. Seriously.
Take it on.
Yeah.
Dan Kent, do you know what a social media influencer is?
I have heard the term.
Because you said you're old, so I'm just
Yes, I've heard the term.
Okay, so I'm going to take Instagram for one, and there are many, I'm sure there's guys, but I primarily know of women who are influencers on there, meaning they have a huge following, and so their opinion seems to have quite a bit of cachet. And they'll even get paid to advertise certain things because they're influencers.
Yeah.
Why? Because they're influencing people. And so there is this one influencer, she's pretty young, maybe millennial age, but anyway, gorgeous, white, and she has, interestingly enough, taken her influence and really tried to shine a light on the very thing that you're talking about.
Good.
She gave no less than 5 examples of things that she has done that were breaking the law, that were illegal, just in her stupidity, not on purpose, but stealing something from the mall, speeding away from a police officer, talking her way, flirting her way out of it, like out of a ticket. And she listed no less than 5 things that she had done that she absolutely got off scot-free. And she was saying, not to be boastful, I think just trying to shine a light to say, it's because I look the way that I do, because someone else, female, male, but if they're a person of color, had done any number of these things, the story wouldn't be the same. And so I think there are resources that people can educate themselves about that very issue.
But I think that the incarceration problem and how police treat people is obviously it's a hot topic right now, but I think that it should be a political topic because I think the politicians have the most leverage. And so I think one of the things that we can do is we can make it known that we care about this issue, especially if you're white, especially if you're middle class white person. Politicians care what you think. It's dumb, but they do. And so I think you need to make it known that you care about, you don't want it to be unfair for people. And especially, here's the other thing too, and I'm a competitive person,
Whoa!
like board
Get
games,
ready, people.
board games, basketball. As terrible as I am at basketball, I want to win, and I play hard, and that's true in life too. It's like I want to win in life.
That's your words with friends junkie, aren't you?
I used to be, but I had to stop because I was too addicted.
Okay. I'm seeing some of that competitive stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
And but that's the way it is in life too.
Yeah.
It's like I like the challenge, and I like to overcome challenges. But I want those challenges to be fair, As an ambitious person who is striving to be the best person he can be, it's not as rewarding to me if the competition has unfair disadvantages. And so if you really are somebody who is self-confident, and if you're somebody who feels good about, your race or whatever, then you shouldn't be opposed to eliminating the things that make, this free market kind of uncompetitive. And I think, because I'm also a capitalist. I'm talking a lot now, and I'm going to stop with this. I also am not opposed to capitalism. Free market capitalism, I think it's a fine system, and there's pros and cons with every system. But the problem is that we don't have a free market system.
Right.
And it's not a free market system if certain races don't have the same opportunities, don't have the same advantages as other races. And so those are the types of things where I'm just like, we need to let our politicians know that this is what we want and this is what we care about. And I hope that they will take that and act. So, and I think that they are. I think that politicians care more this year than they did even last year about these issues.
while the murder of George Floyd was horrific, it's still hard for me to fully talk about. I will say that it has been interesting and eye-opening to see all that has occurred since then. And part of that is because many people within the white community have like become aware, have taken notice and said, you know what, that is not okay, enough is enough. And so when enough people begin to cry out, then those in power do have to at least begin to attempt to listen to make change. Dan, would you say that part of our role as kingdom people is to try to do our part? Like, we're not God, right? But would you say that part of our role is to do our part to bring God's kingdom on earth as much as possible?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that.
Is it?
You know, we're going to be starting a series
What?
next week on that very question.
Shocker.
That's a brilliant transition.
Oh, my word.
Yeah, you know, I think that is sort of the Great Commission, that Jesus' last command is to bring the kingdom of God and to go and make disciples for the kingdom of God. And that's sort of what our role is to bring God's vision of shalom, God's vision of kingdom, God's vision of what community is supposed to look like, to make that real here and now. And that isn't just like an alternative to free market capitalism or an alternative to communism. It really is the system that works for eternity. Because, you know, I think this is why I'm getting way ahead of myself. I can't say that.
He's excited about this next series, right?
No spoilers. But I'll say, really kind of there. Well, let's see. The series is on the Sermon on the Mount. I'll start with that.
Start with that.
The
Sermon on the Mount.
Sermon on the Mount.
Okay.
And the Sermon on the Mount is sort of Jesus' magnus opus in the Gospels. It's his primary sermon. It's where he flushes out what exactly this eternal kingdom is going to look like, and what works in this kingdom and what doesn't work in this kingdom. And here's one spoiler I'll give, is racism does not work in this kingdom. I know, it's a shocker. And so we need to start working on that now, because racism is something that emerges out of problems that are kind of anti-kingdom problems that we each have in our own hearts. And so we need to work on those things now so that we can be compatible with God's kingdom. And we're going to start a big series on this. And part of the reason why I'm so excited about this is because, you know, Matthew 23, Jesus tells his disciples that you have one teacher, the Messiah. You are all students, you have one teacher. And now, that doesn't mean that we can't find truth anywhere else and that the only thing we can read is the New Testament red letter version or anything like that. It just means that, you know, whatever truth you find in the world, Jesus somehow orients it all in the right direction. Jesus is sort of points it all in this eternal direction. And that's so exciting because, man, we have so many people in this world who are teachers and prophets and shepherds and life coaches and thought leaders and all of these things. And you look at like how the world has gone, and you have the Jim Joneses and you've got the Bernie Madoffs who all say that they have this special knowledge and this special wisdom and they're going to lead you to this special place. And a lot of times the leaders of the world end up leading us into more pain and suffering. And here you have Jesus who comes and says, no, you have one teacher, the Messiah. And the Sermon on the Mount is the teaching. The Sermon on the Mount is sort of what his teaching is. And it's a beautiful thing. And I think what you're going to find is, as we go through this sermon, it's 3 chapters in Matthew. It's a big piece of text. And so we're going to work through it for a while. I think that the themes of racial reconciliation are going to be kind of prominent in that entire series. And so
I'm so glad you highlighted that, because I would hate for people to think that race problem solved.
Yeah, all done.
And now on we go with our TED Talks. No, absolutely not. Like, but you will see how it fits into the grander narrative. And Jesus was serious about reconciling us to him, but also reconciling us to one another. And I think that is just so beautiful. And I cannot wait.
And kind of what you said too about some of the hope that you have right now too is I feel like we could do the Sermon on the Mount series without really talking much about racial reconciliation, but I do really feel that Woodland Hills, at least, as a church, has our hearts have been really shaped and touched by the events that have taken place over the last couple months. And just in my conversations with Greg and Paul and Janice and stuff like that, it really feels like, no, this is going to be, there's going to be a lot of racial reconciliation stuff in this series. And so,
it's baked in for sure.
Yeah, which makes me feel hopeful that, the events that took place weren't for nothing.
Exactly.
People are changing, including us. And so, it's encouraging.
Yeah, I love how we have made reconciliation in regards to race as well a central theme to what Jesus was all about. And I think we'll just see more of that. And so we invite you to continue to tune in and join us. It's going to be a very fruitful, it's going to be a very rich series that you won't want to miss. And then guess what? You can still keep coming here on Tuesdays to the MuseCast because we're going to still continue the conversation. We absolutely have had a blast having these talks and diving in a little deeper, hearing from you guys. It's been wonderful. So please continue to tune in. Earlier today, we were on the pastoral team.
Yep.
And we got this we got this really powerful, enlightening, like this right-on quote sent to us by one of our other pastors, by Alan Hirsch, just talking about the church and the opportunity of the church in this interesting time and moving forward. So Dan, will you close us out by sharing that quote with us?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, and I think in a sense it is fun. If you're like a thought nerd, it's fun. So Alan Hirsch says this: if you want to learn how to play chess, you should start by removing your own queen. Once you've mastered the game without the most powerful piece, then put the queen back in and see how good you are. For the church, the Sunday service has been our queen. We've been relying on it too much. Now that the queen has been taken off the board, it's time to rediscover what all of the other pieces can do. When you gather again, you will have new skills. You will be better. It's not that we want to forever go without having the Sunday service. It's just that there's this tremendous opportunity for the thing that we've lost over the last few months. And boy, I tell you what, that is motivating for me because it reorients things from, instead of feeling the loss of the Sunday service, the Sunday sermon, it really kind of gives me this opportunistic way of looking at, okay, what can we strengthen? And I've said this, you have like Cedric and Delon and Nimi and you and Osheta and myself and David and some of these people have just sort of emerged as voices that might not have had that opportunity had these things not happened, had the queen not been taken off the board. And even the MuseCast, this is another thing.
This is another thing.
This came up because we wanted to have more presence for our community. And but I think that there are more opportunities there.
Absolutely.
So think about in your own life. Think about how you can make changes to your own life and to yourself that will make you better when you get your queen back, whatever the queen is in your life.
Amen to that. That was a good word.
Thanks. Thanks, Alan.
We appreciate you, Alan. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week. Have a great one, guys. Bye.